Hello Internet, and welcome to Ramblings of a Madman. I'm Alex, and I'm joined by Sean and Stuart for a shallow and probably uninformed dive into the world of unexplained mysteries, conspiracy theories, and the supernatural. We're back, and we're joined by Radio Sean this time, because he's on a different microphone than usual.
With crazy effects, no.
With crazy effects. Give us the voice of God, Sean.
I'm using my new mixer, so hopefully this sounds pretty good.
Hopefully it does. It sounds fine to my untrained ears, but
yeah, sounds good.
Who knows? There's going to be someone who's telling me it's awful and we should go die in a fire.
Yeah.
But
It'll be the only time anyone comments on the video will be all the comments about Sean's new mic being awful.
Yeah. And me just resisting the urge to fully bass boost it. I can't resist.
Initiate all the bass. And Stuart has found the topic this time. I hope this week, because I haven't.
I haven't.
Uh-oh. We're in trouble,
So
boys.
all the pressure's on you.
Yep, I have. So, welcome back, everybody. I suppose it is my turn to do the shilling.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think after last week when we put it on Sean's shoulders, you should do the shilling this
It's
time.
my turn to feel greasy and disgusting.
Do a better job than I did, come on.
Yeah. So, Ramblings of a Madman is available on all podcast platforms. Pretty much, if you think of a podcast platform, it's probably on there, and that'll do.
Is that it?
I don't really know. Sean's right, it's harder than you think when you haven't rehearsed it.
Your mind goes blank, doesn't it?
Stu, I've got this, okay. Ramblings of a Madman is on YouTube,
Yep.
Ramblings of a Madman is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all your... Fuck. It's hard.
Podbean, other platforms.
Yeah, go over to Apple Podcasts, give us a rating and review. That's the main thing, really. Leave a comment if you're on YouTube. Give us a like. Subscribe if you want. And here we go. What amazing topic have you got, Stuart?
Okay, so I have brought for you boys the Hollinwell incident.
Okay,
Has
I
anybody
don't know
ever
what
heard
this
of it?
is.
No.
Nope.
Excellent. So this is one of these sort of conspiracy theory mystery ones where there is an accepted conclusion, and we're going to see which one we think is that accepted conclusion based on the information that I give you. So,
Okay.
the Hollinwell incident. So the year is 1980. It's a Sunday in July, and we're in the English Midlands, Nottinghamshire to be exact, at Hollinwell Showground in Kirby in Ashfield, an ex-mining town. The annual Hollinwell Show is taking place, and as part of a charity show organised by the Forest League of Juvenile Jazz Bands, a competition for junior brass and marching bands has been organised. There are some 500 children from 11 marching bands in attendance, and with the show scheduled for 9 a.m, many children were reported to be tired and nervous for a performance, having travelled up to 40 miles to attend for an early start. At around 10:30 a.m, children start dropping like flies. It appeared as if there was a sudden contagion of fainting. This continued into the hundreds. Some additional reported symptoms including vomiting, dizziness, sore throat, and sore eyes. And a total estimated number of victims was around 300, with 259 of them taken to 4 nearby hospitals. The total number of victims actually includes adults, children, and babies. And the scene was quoted as looking like that of a battlefield, with the grass littered with the sight of unconscious people.
And strewn instruments.
And strewn instruments.
But just getting past the child injury, though, I want to go back to, what was the thing called? The League of Extraordinary Jazz Players?
That's the
whatever?
one, yeah, the League of Extraordinary Jazz Players.
That's the real travesty here.
That is the real
I mean, that is definitely a cult. I've solved it already.
So it's the Forest League of Juvenile Jazz Bands.
Pretty much what I said.
Pretty much what you said, yeah. So, although most of the symptoms were very short-lived, mostly resolving within hours, the media hype quickly grew to ask the question, what happened at Hollinwell? So, obviously, that's pretty much the case. So what do you think, initially? What's going through your heads? What do you think's going on?
Heat stroke.
Okay.
I mean, I'm joking, but it's got to be... All right, the 3 things that popped into my head were like some kind of chemical warfare.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, no, but some kind of terrorist attack.
Okay.
Some kind of... heat stroke was the first thing. I'm going to rule that out, but I'm going to leave it in there just in case it's some kind of environmental thing that we don't know about. And then some kind of gas leak, even though they were outside.
Okay.
But
was there like a community picnic going on? Did they all eat the same food?
Okay, so keep giving me your thoughts. I'll come back and answer that question.
Because I'm thinking, like, have you seen the music video for Foo Fighters Learn to Fly?
Yeah,
and they all get sick on the plane because they ate the food. I mean, I'm thinking of something like that.
Okay.
Except musical based.
That does make a lot of sense. It's got to be. It has to be something, obviously, that they were all from all round, right?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a charity show, so it's organised by the Forest League of Juvenile Jazz Bands, and they've set up a competition for junior brass and marching bands. So it's 11 marching bands from over Nottinghamshire, and pretty much the journey for most people was about 40 miles. So it's not a huge radius to draw around, but they're from all over, and obviously it's at a showground. It's at the Hollinwell showground. So there are not only the people performing, but presumably friends, family, people that live nearby who fancy a Sunday out in July.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, is it national? But if it's over over Nottinghamshire,
yeah, I think it's county,
which isn't a small area, but that's quite a large area. So what I'm trying to say is, it's not like they're all from the same village or town, where there might be something that was in the water that cropped up. Well, there still could be water, but for them all to drop at the same time, it's got to be something that happened there on that day.
Okay.
That's kind of what I'm going with. It's got to be something that's on that day, either something that's really intentional, that was done on purpose, or not.
Yeah, did they have any enemies?
Did they have enemies? Did
one of the marching bands did one of the marching bands not get not?
Did they like write a piece like discriminating against like some group or something like that?
Maybe.
Well, no, that's actually a good point, because what if one of the bands was it a complete range of people?
Oh yeah, was one of the bands completely fine, and they're like sabotaged? They're the culprits.
And they got the gold medal for it.
So they could win the gold loot for the marching band competition.
Yeah, I mean, you've actually solved it. That's the end of the episode.
9 minutes in, solved it.
Yeah, a new record. No, everybody. So it was a mix of people. So, like I said, so predominantly children, but adults and also babies were also affected.
Right, okay.
Okay, so if I think of recent illnesses that affect adults and children differently, there's a big one coming to mind, but it's reversed. So this must be like reverse COVID.
Okay, go on.
Continue.
So it's worse for children and not as bad for adults, but COVID was like worse for adults and not as bad for children.
Okay.
Yeah, the elderly were more vulnerable.
COVID.
Yeah, it's upside. It's topsy turvy COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
And a rock.
Okay, so that's Alex's confirmed theory.
It did take me a solid 30 seconds to work out what Corona was backwards.
Oh.
That's what Anna Rock was. I was like, what the hell was
Anna Rock.
Yeah, I just completely ignored what he said because I was like, what the hell is he on about?
You can have that one.
I'll take it. Sure. It's content.
Okay. Right, so some theories then. So the whole way through this, I want you to think about which of those do you think is likely to be the official conclusion that was concluded, I suppose. But I also want you to think of which of those do you think actually happened, because you might not agree with the official conclusion. So the first theory that we've got, and Sean touched on it, was a gas leak.
Okay.
So do you guys know of any problems with gas leaks or particular
After
gases?
a curry, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Particular gas leaks that can cause mass fainting, and Sean, leave that there.
Right, let's bring the humour back to a more sophisticated level, okay? No, I'm
That's the
thinking...
stand we have on this show.
I'm thinking... Where...
Carbon monoxide?
Where were they again?
Yeah.
Well, carbon monoxide poisoning, yeah.
Yeah. So
Like if they're outside, it won't be as bad as it usually is, right? Because it can be pretty like lethal, can't it? Carbon monoxide.
So carbon monoxide poisoning is lethal. So the most common causes of carbon monoxide poisoning are headache, dizziness, weakness, upset stomach with vomiting, chest pain, people can get confused, and extremely high levels cause collapse and death.
Yeah, do you remember that story on Reddit a couple of years ago with the guy that got carbon monoxide poisoning?
Not everyone lives on Reddit.
Oh, well, I'm sure most of our viewers do anyway, but I'll continue the story.
That's true. Not to offend, I use Reddit quite a bit.
So there was a guy who was like, made a couple of posts, I think over like a week period or something like that. And he was like complaining that he thought people were like following him and people were breaking into his house because things were moving around without his knowledge of it. He'd see like notes written down that he didn't write and things like that. So he was really concerned that someone was breaking into his house and stealing stuff. But in the comments, someone asked him to check his carbon monoxide detector or whatever to see if he was getting carbon monoxide poisoning.
Okay.
And it turns out he had been getting poisoning and he'd been moving the stuff himself and forgetting about it. And writing notes and stuff and just forgetting that he did it.
That's mad, that is.
It was crazy.
So confusion's a really prominent one for carbon monoxide poisoning. It doesn't quite explain the symptoms that people have had here, though. But the vomiting definitely does. The headache, the dizziness.
Fainting.
Collapses, yeah.
What symptoms doesn't it explain?
So the collapse. So what we're talking about is lots and lots and lots of people collapsing. So extremely high levels of carbon monoxide will cause collapse. But you'd expect some people to die if there was so much carbon monoxide in the air that there's a
that's what I wanted to
collapsing
confirm, because you said
episodes.
that everyone collapsed, but no one actually died.
Yeah, so nobody died. 259 people were taken to hospital for it.
And there was about 500 people there or something, wasn't there?
And there were 500 children marching. So there's there's a lot more people. There's more than just the children marching. So there's friends,
probably
family.
more like 1,000 or something then, because if everyone's got parents and family,
yeah. If you imagine
organisers,
yeah. And then like going on to another thing you touched on, but people might be doing like food and drink vending stalls, things like that. So
maybe more like
259
2,000
people collapsed. Yeah. So it's a good number of people that collapsed. So they reckon about 300 people collapsed in total. There's not an official confirmation because some of the symptoms resolved quite quickly and some of them took a bit longer to resolve and needed several hours. But nobody died. So
yeah, like the more you describe it, I just keep going back to heat stroke, like Sean said.
Yeah, but I don't think we'd be talking about it. Not to meta, but I don't think we'd be talking about it if it was something as simple as heat stroke.
Okay. So I suppose
Expectant pause.
I suppose the question would be then, so let's go down the lines of, let's use carbon monoxide as the source of a gas leak. So where do you think it would come from?
Underground pipes.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. I can't think of a reference. Like Alex, obviously you had a very specific Reddit story. I'm trying to think of an example, but I do remember there being underground pipe leaks that were going through the soil and affecting people in that way. And yeah.
There was another bit of
natural
information.
gas.
Yeah.
Was it? Maybe it was. There was actually a gas pocket or something underneath that no one knew about, and it just started leaking through the.
So maybe something underground. So there was a bit of information I gave you when I told you where it happened. Kirby in Ashfield, which is where the showground is, was an ex-mining town. So
I might be right.
Yeah, in the mine shafts.
Yeah. So the question would be: could there have been a gas leak from an old mine shaft? In terms of that, it's quite hard to test for, because in terms of how quickly it happened, by the time that you would kind of get to test it, you might not be able to find traces of a gas, because obviously it's in fresh air, so it's blowing away. The other thing that kind of goes against that is that nobody really heard any sort of explosions or rumbling, anything to suggest that there should be some sort of significant event that would cause a leak of gas to come up in such high concentrations for a very local population to be affected by it so quickly and for it to be so short-lived. it would
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
had
there would have to
it
be some
would have
sort of
likely-
sparking event, wouldn't there?
Yeah, I was going to argue with you, but for what it is, because it could have literally just been like a perfect storm. It could have been just like a rock falling over and opening up a hole.
Yeah.
As
Yeah, maybe the marching
simple
of
as
the
that
feet
sounds.
causing
there you go, yeah.
disruption of the ground.
I knew you'd get it eventually, Stu.
It's a hard one to say for sure because, like, the symptoms seem to match, besides the fainting, but without any guy in a lab coat going out there with some sort of gas detector.
See, I'm
Don't really
thinking more along the lines of the fact that only a certain number of people were affected. So there's two things I'm thinking. If it's location, like where they physically were locally within that area. So they didn't all drop at the same time, but they started to drop around about the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they were all in one section of the seating area or near the stage or whatever, that to me is more likely that there was a very localized gas leak. But then I'm thinking, if it is gas, or if it's not, regardless of what it is it something about those people in particular that were affected by it? So we were saying about coronavirus being, the older generation or people with vulnerabilities being more susceptible to it. What if those 200 to 300 people who did collapse were more susceptible to whatever the cause of this was?
Yeah, so that's definitely a good argument. It's difficult for me to answer that exactly because of the spread of ages that were affected.
Mm-hmm.
So because there were adults, children and infants, like proper babies, all affected by it, it's hard to say why a certain group of those adults and a certain group of those children and a certain group of those babies would have been affected by it more than anything else, apart from, like you said, geography. So it seems as if while this performance is happening, so the show started at 10:30, the show started at 9 o'clock, sorry. They'd been performing for best part of an hour and a half before the children had started collapsing. And it started with the children before it sort of cascaded to affect other people. But the children, from witness reports, it started with the children that were performing. It was those that started collapsing first.
Can, like, instruments create, like, gas leak?
Ooh.
I don't think so.
Well, no. I thought you were going
say-
somewhere completely different with that. I'll be honest.
Okay, where do you think I was going?
We'll
Probably
talk
made
about
more
this one
sense.
first, and then I'll go to where my mind was thinking, because that's... Go on.
I don't know, like, friction and, like, breaking down the material that instruments are made of create, like, a chemical reaction. I don't know, what some crazy science
Well, you did some
stuff
band,
going
didn't
on.
you, Alex?
Yeah.
In school. So it was a brass and marching band. So what kind of instruments were in band when you did it?
So I did percussion, which means I was at the back on my own. But yeah, it was like brass, woodwind, lots of silvery, shiny instruments.
Did anybody ever have any funny do's while they were performing? You remember?
No, not that I remember. No one passed out.
We're onto something, Alex, because Stu's asking very specific questions there.
No. I'm asking a very generic question.
Or you're just trying to make us look stupid, I don't know. It's working.
But the thing is, I was far at the back, so I can't confirm or deny that anyone ever passed out.
Okay,
in the front.
did you ever see a group
No.
of people collapse?
Brass band, woodwind, they all involve breathing.
Okay.
But then, no, because everyone performing were...
Was breathing,
Children.
I hope.
Everyone performing were children.
Yeah, this isn't a School of Rock situation where there's one adult who's like snuck his way in.
That's all I'm asking. So,
Jack Black wasn't there. Don't worry.
I was thinking, like, if there was a gas leak, you're more likely to be affected by it if you're exercising or breathing, because playing an instrument, singing, whatever, it's all exercise.
Are you thinking like the fact that you're breathing it in quicker and more more volume over the same time?
Yeah, can it get concentrated by the instrument?
Well, that's what
Trapped inside.
That's what I'm thinking. When you first said it, I didn't know if you were going to say like, the like a double bass or something, like a really deep bass note. Maybe that resonated and caused the gas leak. I don't know, which could happen. You're making
Sean's
jokes
turned his bass feed up to the highest it'll go.
like this.
Yep, careful, there might be a localised gas leak. And make that what you will.
So I shouldn't have bought a mixer because it's just too fun now. You need more bass? No, I'm thinking now maybe there's a certain metal or a certain type of wood that's...
Yeah, that could create a chemical reaction.
Yeah, in the air or something, but then, I don't know.
I mean, that would happen a lot more, though, if that was a thing.
Well, would it? What if it was a very specific type of gas? Because you don't get gas leaks in every musical performance, do you? Hopefully not, anyway.
Well, what I'm saying is that, like, the things instruments are made of are pretty standard throughout the world. It's not like all these people made their own instrument and brought it with them. They probably all bought it from a shop.
But you don't
bought them
get
from the local
gas
poisoned
leaks.
kazoo shop.
Yes. It was the owner of the shop all along. His grand plan, because he hated the fact that he had to work in a musical shop.
Why a kazoo?
It's just because it makes a horrendous noise.
I will not have that slander on my show.
I don't know. I think we're onto something. Like,
Do you? Do you really?
yeah, I'm going to roll with it. Silver is an inert metal.
Okay, someone get the table of elements out.
Yeah.
They do some science.
No, because I have to say I'm not an expert in chemistry at all. No, but I'm thinking, would it be chemistry or physics?
Chemistry.
Yeah, I'm just proving the point.
Do you want me to put you out your misery?
Yes, please.
Are we wrong?
Yes.
Damn it!
I never would have guessed.
I had faith.
As far as I know, it wasn't the instruments that were the problem.
Okay.
Okay. Was it something to do with the performance? Like specifically the fact that...
Was it so bad?
They all just started collapsing.
Shut up! No, I'm thinking... Okay, no.
But they reached
thinking?
a certain vibration in their footsteps.
No, I don't...
And they made white noise.
Does it have
noise.
any... What I mean is, does it have anything to do, not necessarily with the instruments, but just something to do with the fact that what the event was? Like, is it something to do with the fact that people were performing, whether it's the exertion
Could
and the
be.
exercise? Okay.
So, you mentioned heat stroke, didn't you?
Was
Yes.
I right?
Tell me about heat stroke.
It's too much exposure to the sun where your internal body temperature goes above 40 degrees.
Okay. And what happens?
What happens? Your body starts to... The enzymes start to denature and you... God, where's all this fucking science coming from?
You know when you said you weren't an expert?
I'm doing all right.
Not.
I'm not, but I'm like, I've got to be close. Come on. No,
You're just saying sciencey words.
no, enzymes denature when they get
The
too cold.
capillaries burst forth from the electron shells.
Well, your body, your internal body temperature is meant to stay
It's
around
37,
about 37.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, so once it goes anywhere above that, you'll eventually die. But
Yeah, your body gets sad.
you start to faint and pass out and feel sick
Yeah.
because your body starts shutting down.
Yeah, so you get vomiting, you can get collapse. So, in this case, we've got a scenario where lots of people are marching, and we've got lots of people collapsing, and they're all presumably carrying heavy instruments. They're in probably band gear, some sort of uniform that symbolises who is who from each of the marching bands. You've got a day in July, so it might be quite warm.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
do you have the temperature of the day?
No, sorry. Well,
You're saying you didn't go check it?
I actually do remember reading that it wasn't as warm as you might expect if
But
it was going to be heat stroke.
That
Was it a
would make
solid
sense.
British 14 degrees?
So I think, if I remember rightly, although it was July, it was not a sunny day. I think it was more overcast.
Okay.
And it may have even rained at one point, but I
Okay,
can't remember
good.
that for certain.
But then, I'm not saying it's not heat stroke, because we're talking about it, but it's happened to too many people.
So who does it happen to that heat stroke doesn't explain it for?
You said it was all age ranges. The babies aren't sitting there lifting instruments. Well,
Hopefully not. Teach them from a young age.
I'm imagining a single troop of babies now performing.
It said juvenile. How juvenile? But you might have like family members. Not every single family member would be lifting, doing physical exertion. A lot of them would just be sat there watching, either drinking water or alcohol. Alcohol would make heat stroke a lot worse because it dehydrates you. But it just, I'm going with that. Like, it's specifically the babies. If you're saying There's not a super hot day, why were there some babies passing out? That's mad.
Exactly. So heat stroke seems less likely as a reason because of that in particular. So adults and babies that weren't necessarily actively involved in the day also had symptoms of this. They might, I don't know, I can't tell you exactly which set of affected individuals had which bit on the spectrum of symptoms. It may well be that all the adults that were not involved had the sore eyes and felt a bit sick and had a headache, whereas all the children had collapse. From the information that was given, vomiting, dizziness, sore throat and sore eyes were also symptoms, as well as people fainting or having a collapse. So, babies, vomiting, having red eyes.
It was
collapsing.
Like super extreme hay fever.
It could have been. So that's theory number 4, actually, Alex. You've gone too
Oh, wow,
far.
really?
No.
Getting my hopes up.
The bait.
No, do you know sometimes when there's like a wind from the Sahara and you get like sand in places? What if there was like a wind from, I don't know, France and it carried like a different type of pollen that people aren't used to?
I mean, the man's crazy, but it lines up with what I was saying about only some people being affected.
Okay. So, from a breeze point of view then, so let's assume it's windy. What else could have been blown towards the area?
Insects.
Mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes. Was it
You
malaria?
haven't got that down, but...
So it's wrong. Let's move on.
Just because you haven't got it down doesn't mean it's wrong.
So it's on the show is hosted on a local field.
Cows. Sheep. Farm animals.
Yes, farm animals were getting blown. Hitting children in the face, knocking babies out. That's the answer. Yeah.
Just a sheep drop kicking somebody.
No, I'm thinking, as soon as you said fields, then my mind's gone a bit morbid. But I'm thinking, like the Moors murders with Ian Brady and all that, and like
lots of
nobody noticed, but a serial killer killed 300 people.
No. That's not what I meant. That's not where I was going with that at all. No, I meant they hid all the bodies in the moors.
What?
So you're saying what did the wind blow? What if it was like decay?
Okay, so an odour. Is that what you're trying to say? So there's a horrible odour that gets blown in.
Yeah, but people would notice that.
Okay, yeah.
So
nobody
wrong.
reported any horrible odours. Let's shut that one down.
All right. The reason that we're being presented this is because it's going to be some wacky thing that we've never heard of, or it's completely unresolved. What if I'm thinking outside the box?
You're very far away from the box. I mean, you can see the box with binoculars, but that's as close as you can get.
I've thrown it in the wrong box.
So specifically, it's on a farm. Or rather, it's on a field near farms.
Yeah, if you've got a lot of dead bodies buried under this field, they're obviously there's a lot of gas building up in the bodies, and if you have some sort of event like marching, it could release all the gas, and then that could cause all the illnesses. It's body gas.
Okay.
No, I can't.
What's
argue.
wrong with that, Sean?
Nothing. It's better than mine. No, I'm lost with what you're trying to insinuate. Right? Was it something living?
No, it's used to do the exact opposite.
Oh,
Pesticides.
It was pesticides. Yeah.
Yes, pesticides.
Ah.
So the 1980s. Since then, a lot's changed in terms of chemical use, knowledge of how the environment's affected, the dangers of pesticides. The show is hosted on a local field, and neighbouring fields have farmlands which actively used pesticides. So, one of the pesticides that they found to be used, which was called Tridamorph, or the brand name was Calixin, has since actually been classified as a Class 2 moderately hazardous pesticide, as it's believed to be harmful if swallowed and can cause irritation to the skin and eyes.
I mean, if you want to kill things, then you need a good chemical to do it. So,
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's a pesticide used on local fields. So the question is then, okay, so it's on local fields. How does it get over to the showground?
I mean, it's sprayed in an aerosol anyway, right? So what if it was being sprayed at that time?
Okay.
water?
I was going to say health and safety and stuff like that.
Groundwater?
Okay, so water. So the thing about it, if it was sprayed in water, is do you think it's likely that everybody would have the same effect?
If they were drinking the same water, yeah.
No, I didn't mean drinking it. I mean, it could just travel in the groundwater.
Yeah, but then who's drinking the groundwater?
No, it could just get, like, spurted out into the air.
By what?
So stamping?
Okay.
Stomping.
Okay, so
Rhythmic
marching bands,
jazz
yeah.
music.
Yeah. So it might be that a mixture of factors did it. So it might be the wind blowing it. It might have contaminated the groundwater that's then aerosolized by people stamping on it. It also could be that it's been sprayed on the ground there, particularly to stop weeds growing. But it was an industrial pesticide, so the likelihood is that what it's been done is it's been used on the local farms and potentially made contact with our showground. The main thing about it, though, is that although there's a bit of a spread of symptoms, the symptoms are mainly irritation to the skin and to the eyes.
I was just about to say
harmful
that.
if you ingest it. So we'd have had to have everybody that had the collapse ingest it, and everybody that didn't collapse not have ingested it.
Yeah. It could be possible, because it just means that those 200 to 300 people were the ones that collapsed. That were the ones that ingested it somehow. But it still doesn't feel right, because it's not doesn't line up with the symptoms. Like you said that they literally just passed out, right?
Yeah, so they just fainted.
So was there anything reported about skin irritation, itchy eyes, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so some of the symptoms that were reported by the 300 people was vomiting, dizziness, sore throat and sore eyes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And also people fainted. So of the 300 people that were affected, the 259 that were taken to hospital, kind of the indication that I got from reading it was that most of them had more significant symptoms. So they'd either had a collapse, or they'd had significant vomiting, or they'd had multiple symptoms of concern. So it might be that they'd had a collapse and then they'd come round and they'd had been vomiting afterwards and they were concerned that there could be something going on. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a lot of people who don't have a full explanation of the symptoms represented by the pesticide use.
So the only argument against what you're saying is, what if the pesticide hasn't been fully tested on humans? Because hopefully it hasn't. So they wouldn't know about all the extra symptoms, or the fact that it doesn't completely affect everyone exactly the same way.
Well, potentially.
You know what I mean? Like, in theory, the symptoms that are recorded might have only been from 2 or 3 cases where someone's accidentally ingested it, or when they initially found out, oh my god, this is a pesticide, this could do what we want it to do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. The difficulty is with it, though, is explaining how everybody would have been affected. But certainly that's a potential, isn't it? It could be that it's in the groundwater. Although it's a July day, it's not a particularly sunny July day. It's overcast, cloudy, it may have rained recently. It might just be that it's in the water and the marching has aerosolized it to a local population. Again, though, in terms of the fact that it's been classified as Class 2, which is moderately hazardous and harmful if swallowed, is I'd expect that the babies, if they had symptoms of it and they'd therefore swallowed it, I'd imagine it would probably really significantly harm a baby / kill a baby comparatively from the dose equivalent.
Yeah, because
the fact that nobody died maybe doesn't rule that out, but it sounds like it would need to be more significant.
Yeah, it's like if that is the case, you're right. Because if everyone had those symptoms, it implies that everyone's had the perfect amount, like the perfect dosage for them to only pass out.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to get conspiracy-y and say that if it was some sort of like pesticide leak or something like that, then Big Pesticide would get involved and try and cover it up.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So
and say like, oh, no one died. The worst was that someone passed out.
Or it was the farmer and was like, shut up, your music's crap.
splashing poison on babies.
It was Old Man Jenkins.
It was
He really
only meant to
hates
be
that
the
jazz
children.
Music. There's kids nowadays and their big band. Back in my day, it was only trombone.
Harmonica.
Actually, back in the day, it would have been a bigger band, but
Bands have gotten smaller over the days, haven't they?
that's what I mean. Like, you literally have a genre of music called big band.
Yeah, there's a relationship between time and size of band.
Get the graph out.
Nowadays, it's just a computer. Don't even need a guy.
Don't even need a guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
That poor guy lost his job.
Bands.
Okay, so let's go down that route then.
Yeah, so overnight, all the news reports about this absolutely hammered into crop spraying. It was the sole thing focused on by the initial outcry reaction. Everybody said it must be crop spraying. The fields next door admitted to using pesticides. They've used it and they've tested it, and subsequently, at some point down the line, it wasn't classified then, but at some point since then, it's been classified as moderately hazardous to people. So was this classified in response to this? Or, like Sean said, is it just a case of you need a certain number of people to be affected before you can categorically say, actually, it needs a certain classification? Difficult to say, but there was a big focus on crop spraying being blamed for why it happened. But
Did a load of journalists mysteriously die the next day?
I haven't got that written down. Maybe that's been covered up as
You
well.
could
Maybe
dive
that's why
deeper,
I've not
Stu.
got it written down.
You need to dive into the conspiracies. This is what we do on this show.
Well, you tell me. Do you think they all died?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, you're wrong.
It was covered up by Old Man Jenkins.
Poor old man Jenkins. What did he ever do to you?
He's getting some
He hates
shit
jazz.
this episode, isn't he?
I just love jazz. I can't help it.
Jazz.
Okay, continue.
Thanks. So let's go down the route then of the theory of water contamination. So let's say the groundwater might have been affected, but what about if water supplies were affected? So proper water supplies, so drinking water that was supplied at the event, could that have been contaminated?
I mean, yeah.
It could have been, couldn't it?
So it's more rural. You know, you still have buildings, you still have water supply in theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's at a showground. It's a stage that's used for an annual show. Presumably, they've got a water tap that they can turn on.
Well, is it
and
used
off.
for anything else, or is it literally just a big field that they use annually?
I'm not sure. Sorry.
Yeah, so maybe there is no water supply then, like direct one. Maybe they do bring tanks of water.
So yeah, I don't know the answer to that entirely in terms of how the water physically gets there, but from what I read and what there were photographs of in terms of the show, it looks like there probably were stalls that were giving out water at least, and particularly the children were also given water because, like we've talked about, heat stroke is a common thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's an annual show every July. There's definitely going to have been heat stroke in the past, if not today.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, okay, could something have been put in the water? So let's say, for example, alcohol gets put in the water. So what symptoms do we get with alcohol?
You get a bloody good time. That's what you get.
Exactly.
Yeah, boy.
So the babies were absolutely steaming.
Well, vomiting would make sense, but skin irritation wouldn't.
Okay.
I mean, if they poured it in their eyes.
They're washing their face with the water.
Eyeball
like,
Paul.
Oh shit, it's got alcohol in
Yeah,
it.
I mean, if you've been out in the British July overcast sun all day, you might need to wash your face.
No, I'm not buying it. Like,
Okay.
like, I don't think alcohol would be in the water. They'd be able to taste
Have you
it.
ever got a shot in your eye?
No.
It's not fun. Just try it. They call it snake eyes. When you pour a shot of tequila into your eye.
No.
Oh, I have heard of that, yeah.
No.
Really? I just made it up.
Oh, well, no, you definitely can take tequila
You
in your
got
eyeball. You definitely hang on. You definitely can do tequila through your eye. I didn't know whether or not it was called snake eye or not, but you definitely can take tequila through your eyeball.
I wasn't picturing drinking it. I was picturing just literally just splashing it on your eyeball.
Oh right, I thought you meant like consuming the shot via your eyeball.
No, I'm not that clever. I didn't think that far ahead.
Okay, what about drugs then? What about drugs? Could they have put drugs in the water?
Yeah, of course they could have.
Okay.
Meth.
So
Which drug?
So not necessarily which drug, 'cause that's a really hard question. But how might we know whether or not drugs were given?
Drug testing.
Okay, so 259 people went to hospital. Guess how many of them tested positive for drugs?
0.
259 of them didn't test positive for drugs.
Oh, you
What
dick.
is not one drug?
So not one drug. I had you then, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. I was like, all 259? No.
So
Give me
none
one
of
guy.
No, there's got to be
Okay,
at least
yeah.
one guy who had
Yeah.
a bit
Yeah,
of
there's
weed or
one
something.
stoner there.
Yeah.
So nobody tested for drugs. So
There better be
that
an
was-
answer
it was-
to this because it's really starting to wind me up. This is one of the most infuriating ones.
So not only did people get checked over at the hospital, but they also tested water, the ground itself. They tested ice cream, which was on sale, and they also tested drinking water. All of it was negative, evidence of alcohol or evidence of drugs. However, you guys will have seen this yourself. So have you ever had it where you've eaten the same thing as somebody else, and somebody says to you, "I really don't feel well after eating that," and starts chucking their guts up? Have you ever felt sick when they've done that?
Ooh. No, but to be honest, yeah, if I saw someone throwing up, I would feel ill.
So there's an innate phenomena which protects against poisoning, which is a thingy that you have inside you from evolution. I've forgotten the word. What's the word?
It's a brain part,
It's
which
a
we
brain
don't
part,
need
yes.
anymore.
DNA. Trait.
It's fuck. What's the word?
Hypothalamus.
This is Alex's time
The
to
left
list out
phalange.
random science words.
I'm thinking back to my psychology lessons.
Aluminum.
Aluminum, that's the one. Anyway, there's an innate phenomena that's been inherited from when we were cavemen, probably. I don't know,
Yeah.
It's probably not right. But anyway, which protects against poisoning. So if you see, if somebody's had the same substance as you, whatever that is, whether it's food, drink, or, I don't know, drugs or whatever, or eyeball juice, if you see somebody vomiting in a close environment to you, it often provokes an empathic response. So the visuals of a mass vomiting could give you a fight or flight response, maybe.
Mass vomiting.
And maybe people fainted because of that.
Yeah, because fight or flight isn't necessarily just fight or flight, is it? It's
I mean,
also
you have
freeze,
to-
faint, and so
you have to
Yeah,
pre-
it's...
pretty bad into the fight or flight to faint.
Yeah. So the argument against it is that people didn't really have other fight or flight symptoms that you might associate with just before somebody has a collapse. So no one really reported panic attacks or hyperventilating as one of the symptoms. You might expect if someone's hyperventilating that they might black out eventually.
Yeah.
But also that innate phenomena tends to...
phenomena.
Yeah.
All right,
tends to-
moving on. I've never had a joke dismissed so quickly in my life. Yeah, phenomena, blah, 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 moving on.
The thing that goes against that is that most of that would be vomiting based, and actually the symptoms that started with this was collapse. People did start to vomit and have other symptoms as well, like red eyes, sore throat, vomiting, but the domino effect of collapses was what the first set of symptoms was. It may well be that actually this did happen, and that the sight of lots of people collapsing was quite frightening, and people started vomiting.
Mm-hmm. They couldn't believe their eyes, and they just kept rubbing them.
Exactly.
Well, this is the thing. Like you said, there wasn't like people having panic attacks, but surely there would have been panic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like people falling down around you. It'd be like, I don't want to reference this film, but The Happening, where people just like start falling over. It's not a good film. It's a very bad film.
No, it's
but like,
a horrendous film.
you know what I mean? Like you're looking around and people just literally start falling over for no reason. You're going to start panicking, even if you don't have a panic attack.
Let me interrupt you there. So, the theory 4 is one that you guys might have heard something about before, but not necessarily recognised the psychological term for it. Sean, perhaps you might have. So have you ever heard of mass hysteria?
Yes.
I've heard of it.
Alex, do you have any idea what it actually is?
It's people in a group just freaking out because other people are freaking out, right?
Yeah.
It's the domino effect of freaking out.
Yes. So it's a rapid spread of illness, signs and symptoms affecting members of the same group, which originates from a nervous system disturbance involving excitation, loss, or alteration of function, whereby physical complaints that are exhibited unconsciously have no corresponding organic cause. So, say for example, one person has heat stroke and they collapse, and they're next to somebody who is already stressed out, maybe they're a bit tired, maybe they're thirsty, maybe they're out of breath because they're performing, and sees their best mate black out and thinks, holy shit, and then blacks out themselves.
Because they're already at like that sort of peak, yeah.
Yeah, and then the person next to him goes, holy shit, 2 people in my group have just collapsed.
Everybody's dying.
Yeah. Exactly, and then the parents go, holy shit, my child's collapsed and so is their friend, and then they collapse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was going to joke about it, but it's actually true. Like, smiling's contagious, and yawning is contagious.
Yeah. So there's a few examples of mass hysteria or mass psychological events that have happened down in history that you probably will know of. So First World War, so some people talking about shell shock, saying that mass hysteria might be linked, just the sheer horror and the horror spreading amongst all the soldiers in the same group. It might be what's caused a mass psychological event for them. Beetle Mania, so people fainting at the Beatles gigs.
Yeah.
Literally like loads and loads of people just blacking out. And then also like The Exorcist.
Oh,
so
I was just about to say The Exorcist.
In cinemas.
Yeah, they had the first time people went to see it, there was ambulances and stuff outside.
Yeah,
and then the second time everyone's laughing.
Yeah, and then also the Tanganyika laughter epidemic of 1962 is blamed on mass hysteria. So in that story, basically somebody started laughing, and then a few more people started laughing, and then everybody started laughing, and they literally laughed for up to 16 days before people stopped laughing.
Wow.
And that was blamed again on the same thing. So it's spread from there being some sort of trigger, but people representing the same group all being affected by it, and therefore that's where they share that similarity.
Yeah, there's also like kind of a social pressure as well to not be the odd one out. Specifically with that laughing thing, like you don't want to be the one just sitting there in silence when everyone's laughing. I'm not saying like you
I was going to say you're not going to faint or like vomit.
But there is like a innate monkey brain thing going on where it's like, oh, I can't be the odd one out. I better rub my eyes or whatever.
Yeah.
This is really interesting though.
So the main argument about this case is what would have triggered it. So I've mentioned the chain reaction of fainting. So that might just be the fact that they're really hot and it's coincided with them already being at a high performance state because of the show. So their anxiety, on that anxiety curve, they're already quite high. And they've just got overexcited and somebody's blacked out and then it's been a chain reaction. Other people have said, over the years as people have talked about this and witness statements have come out, people have talked about the possibility of seeing wildcats. So nobody, not one person in particular, has said that they definitely saw a wildcat, but the children's memory of this event in terms of what happened was very patchy. And one of the things that was described was somebody seeing something in the distance, not knowing what it was, and then people talking about, well, could it have been a wildcat? So it is in the middle of a field, it is in the middle of nowhere. But wildcats aren't particularly common in this country,
They're
face
not.
it.
So Scottish wildcats are massively endangered and they're only local to Scotland, funnily enough. But in general, like wildcats they're really not that common.
No. So I couldn't find anything that suggested that this was a very highly thought of theory. But there's definitely mentions in multiple sources about people having seen something. It might have been just a simple animal on a neighbouring field in the distance, in somebody that's already sweaty, maybe got slightly tunnel visioned because they're on that pre-faint sort of situation because they're highly anxious and they're performing and they're tired and maybe they're dehydrated and they got up early. But a few people mentioned about the possibility of a wildcat sighting, maybe causing somebody to have a fainting episode. But again, it relies on that domino effect of multiple people fainting in terms of representing how the symptoms that would be there. Again, when we've talked about it in the other theories, the major pitfall for this is mass hysteria is something that tends to happen in people who are particularly anxious, and the big quota of that kind of cohort of people would be the youths. So your adolescents and your children would be affected by mass hysteria, and all the mass hysteria events down the years typically affect a younger audience.
Including babies?
But not babies.
I was going to say, yeah, because they wouldn't know what's going on. Like, to a point, a baby would copy its parent smiling. Like, you can really imprint onto a baby, can't you? But at such a low age, like, because toddlers more so.
I think we need to do a study and try and find the association between liking jazz music and anxiety levels.
I thought you were going to go down the line of we need to find the correlation of throwing up in front of a baby to see if it throws. Let's go with jazz music and anxiety.
Yeah, I think people who like jazz music tend to be more anxious than normal.
I mean, I disagree.
It's a very fast-paced musical style sometimes. Get your heart racing.
I mean, it's really difficult to play.
Exactly. The anxiety of not being able to play it well. Has anyone seen that drum film?
Whiplash.
Where the guy's shouting at the...
Not my tempo.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Was he there shouting at them all?
I mean, no, joking aside, like, it's our own little theory that we're going into, aren't we? We're diverging a bit from the mass hysteria thing. But we're not, in a way, because you said, well, what was the trigger? So everyone being on edge, regardless of the music, it's a competition. It's high.
Yeah, it's a high anxiety state situation.
If it was Eurobeat, it would be fine because those people are quite confident that they're into it.
Yeah, it's the Nottinghamshire chill hop juveniles.
Lo-fi beats to study to.
Exactly, yeah. What was the trigger? That's a good point. What if it was...
Yeah. But I mean, is it even important what the trigger was? Because if you believe it to be mass hysteria, then the trigger could be literally anything.
Yeah.
If one guy has a phobia of wasps, like Sean, for example,
I'm getting better.
A wasp flies into his trumpet and he swallows it.
I'll have to see the doctors after that.
And that's now a genuine fear Sean has. He will not play a trumpet.
I've never
outdoors.
played a brass instrument.
I just have the idea of somebody playing a massive trombone, and as they pull the lever back, it just inhales the beat.
Yeah, and he starts freaking out because he's been stung in the throat. Like inside the throat.
That would explain the sore throat and vomiting symptoms, shouldn't it?
That's making me so uncomfortable. You have no idea.
No, that's why I did it.
I really don't like wasps.
But yeah, the main thing that goes against it is why would the babies be affected? It also, adults tend not to be affected by it. So to think of the potential 300 victims, 259 of them are taken to hospital, but there were 500 children there. So not every child's affected by it, which makes sense. But I don't know exactly how many adults and children were affected by it. So I don't think it's like of the 300, there was one child and one adult. So they've said, 300 adults, babies and children. I think it was quite a lot of adults, but I don't know whether or not, again, they were maybe, like Alex said, people who are already anxious, already have maybe a phobia of being at a public gathering, but because it's an open space, they're a bit better with it. But then they see something that really terrifies them and then they have a blackout.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the explanation. It's difficult to say, but Alex is exactly right. It's nail on the head moment. It doesn't matter whatever the trigger is. The question is mass hysteria responsible for the domino effect of collapsing?
Yeah,
or do you think it's more likely to be
say.
something else is the question. It's a tough one to say.
Because it's not like a solid thing that you can say definitely happens.
Yeah, it's not tangible. We have seen evidence of it. But then going back to the baby thing, it doesn't necessarily affect babies, does it? So, but the thing is, I'm saying it doesn't necessarily affect everyone, but it didn't affect everyone.
Exactly.
It didn't affect all we estimated, I don't know, roughly 2,000 people, for example. Like, probably an over-exaggeration, but, you know, it could be, because not everyone was affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could just be proximity again. Could just be proximity to the guy or the small group who initiated the panic.
Mm-hmm. One other thing, which I tried to give it a bit more substantiation for whether or not it was true or not, but because it's at a showground, there were other shows allegedly taking place. So people talked about there being horses and dog shows being there. Not, I don't think like a full Crufts style show, but whether or not it was a bit of like other entertainment there for people to watch, whether or not it was just horse riding or people who had brought their dogs and their dogs could go to a little, I don't know, like a fenced off area where they could just leave their dogs, like a nursery kind of thing. But there have been witness accounts of horses and dogs also having collapsed.
Okay.
But nobody obviously asked the horse or the dog what happened. And as far as I know, the horse wasn't playing a trombone.
How did they feel?
That would have won. Just putting it out there.
Definitely.
It's more impressive than a baby playing a trombone, but
a whole marching band of horses. Yeah, but that adds more credence to something like a pesticide problem or a gas leak or something that like would affect living creatures generally, rather than just people. Yeah.
That's definitely something, but it was one account of it that people had said.
Yeah.
Take what you will. Some of the information from this is, so the BBC did a show on this a little while back, and people commented on the article, and that's where some of the information's come from this. People saying, I was there and this is what I saw. The substantiation of that obviously is not qualified, so it's difficult to say. But if categorically horses and dogs also collapsed, it pushes you away from mass hysteria. But if horses and dogs didn't collapse, then it perhaps pushes you towards it, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So the final theory then,
aliens? Mark?
So the fifth one is
really?
UFOs.
What a call!
So the fifth one is UFOs. So let me ask you this question. So could a UFO have been shooting rays at the field, causing people to collapse?
Yes.
I cannot confirm or deny.
It's a statistical
possibility
that it could happen, yes.
Yeah. Excellent, because I have absolutely no evidence to disprove it. So let's move on.
Perfect.
So I asked you at the start, which of those do you think is the official conclusion? And then as a separate point to that, which of those do you think happened? We're not quite done yet, but Sean, give us one answer. So which of those do you think is the official conclusion?
I'm going to go with pesticides.
Okay. Alex, what do you think is the official conclusion?
Yeah, I was going to say pesticides as well.
Okay, right, now, Sean, if you think that's the official conclusion, do you believe that that's the official conclusion, or do you actually think it's a different one?
I think it's a different one.
Okay, Alex, different one or the same one?
I think it's the same one.
So you think it's pesticides? So you think official conclusion is pesticides, and you believe it's pesticides?
Yeah.
Okay, so the actual official conclusion to this is that mass hysteria was
really?
Okay.
The official conclusion. And the official conclusion to this, after an inquiry was held, was that mass hysteria was the likely cause. The symptoms experienced by the children demonstrating some of the characteristics of such an outbreak was used as the main focus. People who were present at the event were adamant that their symptoms were real and not the result of their imagination or hysteria, or to give it this proper name, mass psychogenic event.
But they would say that.
Exactly. So, again, with your tinfoil hat on, Alex mentioned before pesticides and the need for covering things up. So, take away the official inquiry for a second, and if you go through each of these theories, the gas leak. So gas leaks from natural gas would be difficult because people talk about using shale gas and natural gas as energy sources, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
So to have such a negative connotation with gas leak would be really bad for people wanting to use gas. It's not mentioned in any official reports about any mention of even acknowledgement of a natural gas leak. It was literally never considered in the official inquiry.
The fact that it was completely omitted That's interesting.
So, from a pesticides point of view, again, they tested for pesticides, found the presence of pesticides on the neighbouring fields, but again, the conclusion to the inquiry was that they didn't think it represented enough. It basically, they couldn't explain how it got to the people involved and why only some people had certain symptoms of it and some didn't. So they've said that they didn't think that pesticides were there. However, a lot of the symptoms and the evidence that's come later with it being categorised as harmful all gives some degree of potentiality to pesticides being the problem. People didn't like pesticides. People still don't really like pesticides, do they? Like, it's still, even now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think enough research has been done on them because, like, the big groups don't want us to do it to see how bad they are, so...
Yeah, it's a ethics thing, isn't it? If somebody comes to significant harm from a deliberate act, who is culpable for that deliberate act? If you kill somebody because of doing an intervention which people don't want to do because they have concerns about it killing people, and then you do it and it kills somebody, it's essentially murder, isn't it?
It's premeditated, yeah.
That idea. So again, it's people aren't testing it, or rather, people aren't doing those tests. It was acknowledged that pesticides were used, but they just said that they didn't feel like it explained it.
Mm-hmm.
But again, since then, it's been categorised as moderately harmful, or moderately hazardous, sorry.
Yeah.
So we know that that is a potential reason. It maybe doesn't quite represent all the symptoms, but again, we don't know if it was just one pesticide or a combination of pesticides, but we definitely know that that one silaxin that they admitted to using on the neighbouring fields is definitely present.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of which bit that you'd cover up, you could argue all day about that the big pharma wanting to cover up their chemical injury that they've caused by shutting it down and the official inquiry coming to that conclusion. But interestingly, neither of you thought that the official conclusion that they would have put was mass hysteria, but that was the official conclusion. It's an odd one, isn't it? That's why I thought it was quite a good case.
It's really difficult because I wouldn't have picked it just because it is... it's not completely unbelievable, but it's the one with the not the least evidence. But you know what I mean? Like, how do you measure it? You can't completely put a finger on it. You can say, yes, there were definitely pesticides. You can say, yes, there was a gas leak if you tested for it. You know what I mean? You can't just go, oh, yeah, there's a 90% of mass hysteria in that field. You can't do that.
Yeah, I think making the official conclusion mass hysteria
is a cop-out.
It reads to me that they don't really know what caused it.
Yeah, exactly. That, yeah.
Not to say that psychological problems like that don't exist, but on such a large scale, it's hard to quantify whether they actually happen or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a... I agree. It does seem like a bit of a cop-out, and I think the way that they've come to the conclusion is they've obviously got witness statements to say that there was that domino effect that sounds like mass hysteria, one chain of events triggering in multiple people. And then what they've said is, well, we couldn't find any evidence of gas. We couldn't find any evidence of there being acute drug poisoning or acute alcohol poisoning or pesticide use directly in the water that people are drinking that wouldn't cause death but would cause an exact sequence of events that causes every single affected person to have a collapse, but nothing more than that. And all of the symptoms resolve within a few hours, except for a couple of the babies. And I think it's only because they were babies they were kept in overnight in hospital, but they were absolutely symptom-free later down the line as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's an odd one.
What do you think, Stu?
I was going to say, you're the one who's actually medically trained.
So, again, as pretty much like I just said, so I definitely can see why they've come to the conclusion of mass hysteria. I definitely feel like pesticides was the one that I was thinking when I was reading into this. I was thinking it just sounds like there's some sort of temporary poisoning which is resolved, and it's a very temporary event. Like, the problem with the mass hysteria is not knowing the trigger, but actually the trigger doesn't matter. It's the subsequent reaction to that trigger that is the exciting bit. But pesticides for me was definitely the one that I would have said, if I had to pick from one of those, would have been the one that I blamed it on.
Yeah, but old Farmer Jenkins
exactly
came along and threatened the board who were investigating it with his double-barrel shotgun. He said, "Get off my land, stop testing my soil." and he shot one of them just to prove that he meant business.
When I said there were no deaths, I didn't say there were any significant bullet wounds.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was fun. Thanks for that, Stu.
That's okay.
I think we went a bit into the weeds though at the start with our trying to work out what the instruments were made of.
Well, no, that was part of the fun, to be fair. But like some of the theories we were coming up with, they could have been true. Until we got more information, that's the point of the show, right?
If only they didn't come from us two idiots.
Exactly. I really like this episode just because I've never really looked into mass hysteria. So obviously I've known about smiling being contagious, yawning being contagious. It happens to me all the time. If someone yawns, I'll yawn and then go, "But you bastard, you just made me yawn." You know what I mean? It is a thing. So to think that it wouldn't extend to someone throwing up, to someone passing out even, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's... But then I don't think it was mass hysteria. Would it explain the skin irritation?
Well, it's difficult to say, isn't it? The question is, has somebody seen somebody come round who's fainting? Have they come round and rubbed their eyes at the sheer panic of what's happened? And that happens to be the cascade of what's happened.
To be fair, so like, I've got a colleague who wears contacts, the contacts that last for ages, and he has to take them out every now and then and put the moisture back into them.
He has to lube them up.
He has to lube them up. He has to lube his eyes up, and then like, I have to. I'm not good with eyes. I'm not good with wasps either, but.
Wasps in your eyes.
No, but like he'll like obviously take the contact out, and I see it, and my eyes start watering, or like they feel uncomfortable. They feel like really. You know that feeling when you feel really tired and like you can barely keep your eyes open? I start getting that as if I need to close them. I'm like, oh, God.
Can you not watch a lizard lick its own eyeball? Is that your weakness?
Your one weakness.
Lizards can lick their own eyeballs? I need to see that now. That's amazing.
Do you? It sounds like you don't need to see that.
No, well, human eyes are a bit different. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to... I'm getting comfortable talking about it. No, I've convinced myself otherwise. Maybe it was mass hysteria.
Okay.
Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen.
Ramblings of a Madman is currently available on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and YouTube. All the links are available on Twitter at Roam Podcast. That's ROAM Podcast. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.